Good evening, my bookish babes. Guys, so I just released the final 3 chapters of the last book that we were reading, In the Hand of the Goddess, on Sunday, and this is Wednesday, and I'm doing not 1, but 2 chapters of our next book. I know. I'm also amazed by me. Guys, guess what? It's almost spooky season. I'm super excited. Not only because the weather will get cooler, but also because who doesn't love spooky season? I've been seeing trailers for the new show Wednesday on Netflix, and I'm very excited about that. It looks super cool. Is Tim Burton a little bit sus? Yes. Yes, he is. Do I appreciate the Addams family because of everything they represent? Yes, I do. So will I be watching the show? Yes. Yes, I will. Let's see, what else? Oh, just to touch on a couple of things. I know that some people have made comments about, chapters versus parts and everything. I can't guarantee that I will always do a double feature of chapters because I do have a full-time job, and I also sometimes just don't feel like it. Sometimes you just don't feel like doing something. You just want to sit on the couch and watch TV, and that's perfectly valid. So I won't always do a double feature of chapters, and I'm not gonna record an entire book or an entire half of a book and post it. For one thing, because I like doing short parts, that way, people don't get lost in whatever chapter they're in, but also because that's just not fun to me. I like after, each 1 or 2 chapters, talking about the chapter, giving my thoughts on the chapter, and hearing your thoughts in the comments. I feel like if I did the super long, parts of a book, that kind of loses its shimmer for me, and it would just get boring and feel less fun. So when we left off in the Hand of the Goddess, Alanna had been revealed for the woman that she is, which, yay, we love a, self-aware queen. So that's exciting. She was on her way to pack for her big trip with Coram, and we are about to start our next book. Our next book is by, of course, Tamora Pierce. 3rd book in Song of the Lioness. Excuse me. The Woman Who Rides Like a Man. And our first chapter is also called, a little on the nose for me, but the first chapter is called The Woman Who Rides Like a Man. Alanna of Trabond, the sole woman knight in the realm of Tortle, splashed happily in the waters of an oasis, enjoying her first bath in 3 days. Hard to believe it's winter in the north, she reflected. In the southern desert, the temperatures were just right, although she objected to so much sand. Best hurry up, Coram told her. Her burly man-at-arms stood guard on the other side of the bushes that concealed the pool. If this is a Bazir watering place, we don't want to wait and find out if they swear for the king or against him. Alanna stepped out of the water, grabbing her clothes. She had no urge to meet any Bazir tribesmen, particularly not renegades. She and Coram were bound for Tira in the south, and coming to battle with the warlike desert men would cut their journey very short. Drying off, the young knight pulled on a boy's blue shirt and breeches. Although her femininity was not the secret it had been when she trained in the royal palace, Alanna still preferred the freedom of men's clothing. It was odd to remember that the last time she bathed in an oasis, she had been a page, and Prince Jonathan had just found out she was a girl. Those days, the days in which she bound her chest flat and never went swimming, were gone. She didn't miss them. Faithful, her pet cat, was yowling a warning. "Alanna!" Coram yelled, seconding the cat. "We've got trouble!" Grabbing her sword, Alanna raced for Coram and the horses. An approaching cloud of dust indicated tribesmen or robbers, and she grimaced as she threw herself into Moonlight's saddle. She trotted forward to meet Faithful, a small black streak, racing toward her across the sand. The cat leapt, landing squarely in front of his mistress before climbing into the leather cup that was his position on her saddle. Alanna's gentle mare held steady, used to the cat's abrupt comings and goings. "Let's try to reach the road," Alanna told Coram. They rode hard. Alanna crouched low over Moonlight's pale mane. She looked back to see Coram shaking his head. "It's no good," he was bellowing. "They've spotted us. Ride on. I'll hold them." Alanna wheeled and stopped, lightning glittering in her hand. "What sort of friend do you think I am? We'll wait for them here." Coram swore. "If you were my daughter, I'd tan your hide. Go!" Alanna shook her head stubbornly. She could see their pursuers now. They were hillmen. The worst of the desert raiders. Reaching behind her, she unbuckled her shield from its straps, slipping it over her left arm. Coram was following suit. "Stubborn lass," he grumbled. "I'd rather tangle with 10 Bazir tribesmen than any hillman." Alanna nodded. The Bazir were deadly fighters, but they had a strict code of honor. Hillmen lived for killing and loot. Renewing her grip on Lightning's hilt, she settled her shield more firmly on her arm. The hillmen closed rapidly, fanning out in a half circle that would close around Alanna and her companion. Grimly, the knight clenched her jaw and ordered, "Take them in a charge." "What?" yelped Coram. Alanna charged directly at the hillman. Coram gulped and followed her, letting out a war cry. Moonlight reared as they reached the first raiders, striking out with hooves. She had been trained for battle years ago. Alanna slashed about with her lightning, ignoring her enemy's yells of fury. A one-eyed villain closed in, grabbing her sword arm. With an angry yowl, Faithful leapt from his cup with his claws unsheathed. The one-eyed hillman screamed and released Alanna, trying to pull the hissing cat away from his face. "Lass, beware!" Coram bellowed, trying to fend off 3 at once. He yelled in pain as one of them opened a deep gash in his sword arm. He swore and attacked again, dropping his shield and switching his sword to his good left hand. Warned by her companion, Alanna whirled to face a giant hillman, a grinning mountain with red hair and long braided mustache. He guided his shaggy pony with his knees, leaving his hands free to grip the hilt of a sword with an odd crystal blade. Alanna eyed its razor-sharp length and gulped. Ducking beneath the red-headed man's first swing, he reversed it, and she blocked it with her shield just in time, yelping at the pain of impact. She struck back with lightning, only to miss her attacker darted away. She refused to follow and fight on his terms. Instead, she brought her lioness shield up and waited. The giant returned, circling her carefully. His pony lunged forward, and Moonlight reared, warning it back with her flailing hooves. Alanna caught another blow from the crystal blade on her shield, feeling the shock through her entire body. "I hope my brother put plenty of magic on this shield," she thought grimly. "Otherwise it won't last through its first battle." She turned Moonlight as the giant circled her onto his nimble pony. With a kick of her heels, she urged the gold mare forward, slashing at her opponent. She was a knight of Tortle, and not to be toyed with. She used every chance to break through his guard. He blocked her time after time, grinning infuriatingly. Alanna drew back, breathing hard and fighting to keep her control. Now the giant returned the attack, and she blinked sweat from her eyes. She could not afford to make a mistake now. His tactics were different from those of the mounted knights she had fought before. She didn't know what to expect. Suddenly, the midday sun was directly in her eyes. He had maneuvered her just for this. Only at the last second did she glimpse his sword descending on her. She brought lightning up hard, slamming her blade hilt to hilt with the giant's sword. There was a ring of clashing metal, and the downward sweep of the crystal edge was stopped. Then, lightning broke, sheared off near the hilt. Moonlight darted away, taking Alanna out of the hillman's range. Her mistress stared at the hilt she was still gripping. Lightning had been her sword ever since she had been considered fit to carry one. How could she fight without it in her hand? Coming out of her daze, Alanna fumbled for her axe. She was trembling with rage. It took all of her self-control to keep from losing her temper completely and making a fatal mistake. Axe in hand, she charged the hillman with a yell. She didn't hear the warning cries of the other hillmen or Coram's gleeful whoop. She heard only the wheezing of the giant's pony and her own choked breath. She swung, swearing, as the hillman ducked and pulled out of her range. She was closing with him again when he yelled. Seeing something behind her, to her fury, he whirled his pony and fled. Calling to the few men he had left, Alanna spurred after him. "Come back, coward!" she cried. The giant turned to laugh and shake his sword at her. His voice was choked off as a black arrow sprouted in his chest. More arrows struck down the hillmen. Only 2 escaped. They rode for all they were worth, pursued by 5 white-robed tribesmen. A vizier, his white burnous tied with a scarlet cord, rode towards Alanna as she dismounted. She was staring at the body of the hillman who had wielded the crystal sword. The blade lay beside him, gleaming against the sand. It glimmered and suddenly flashed. Blinding her for a short moment, Alanna stared against the yellow-orange fire that filled her sight. Was a picture. A dark finger, or was it a pole, pointed at a crystal blue sky. Before it stood a man wearing a tattered gray. His eyes were mad. She could smell wood and smoke. Her eyes cleared, and the vision was gone. Reaching under her shirt, Alanna drew forth the token given to her by the great mother goddess 3 years before. It had once been a coal in her campfire. Now it was covered in clear stone, its fires still flickering under its surface. Alanna knew that if she held it when magic was present, she could see power as a glowing force in the air. She saw magic now as orange light flickered around the sword, and she scowled. Recently, she had dealt with magic of this particular shade, and the memory was not pleasant. The vizier who followed her kicked sand over the sword. "It is evil," he said, his quiet voice slightly raspy. "Let the desert have it." Distracted from the magic, Alanna discovered she was crying. It was as if she had lost a companion, not a weapon. A glint of metal caught her eye, and she stopped to pick up Lightning's sheared-off blade. Sliding the length of metal into its sheath, she strapped the now useless hilt in place. Unless she tried to draw the blade, no one would know it was not whole. Mounting her horse, she settled faithful before her as Coram brought his gelding to her side. "I'm sorry, lass," he told her quietly, putting a hand on her arm. "I know what the sword meant to you, but you can't be thinking of that now. These men may be friends or may not be. Who knows why they saved our skins? You'd best be putting your mind to talk to him." Alanna nodded, trying to collect her thoughts. Their rescuers formed a loose circle around her and Coram as the man who had covered the crystal sword with sand joined them, guiding a large chestnut stallion with ease. The others gave way to him, letting him approach Alanna and Coram. For a while he said nothing, only stared. Finally he nodded. I am Halif Sif, the headman of the Bloody Hawk tribe of the people called the Bazir, he said formally. Those who are dead were trespassers on our sands, riding without leave. You also come here unbidden. Why should we not serve you as we did these others, woman who rides like a man? Alanna rubbed her head tiredly. She felt too tired and dazed for the dance of manners that passed for conversation among the Bazir. Dealing with these desert warriors was bound to be tricky. Luckily, she had learned their ways from an expert. Faithful climbed onto her shoulder, setting up a murmur among the watching tribesmen. Alanna glared up at the cat, knowing he knew he was making the Bazir nervous. I don't see many black cats with purple eyes often, she thought. You're getting too big to sit up there, she whispered to her pet. Never mind that, Faithful told her. His meowing had always made as much sense to Alanna as human speech. Talk to them now. Suddenly, she felt more confident and alert. I hope you will deal with us fairly, Halif Sif of the Bloody Hawk, she replied. We took nothing. We harmed nothing, my friend and I. We are simply riding south. Would you harm a warrior of the king? Her gamble failed as Halif Sif shrugged. We know no king. Alanna could hear Coram shifting nervously in his saddle. It might have been easier to deal with men who acknowledged King Rold of Tortle. Renegades would not take kindly to the presence of Rold's most unusual young knight. You know no king, but others of the Bazir do. If they knew you held a knight of the realm and her companion, they might counsel you to take care, Alanna warned. This produced some amusement among the riders. Only their leader remained grim. Is your king so weak he uses women for warriors? We cannot think well of such a king. We cannot think well of a woman so immodest that she puts on the clothes of a man and rides with her face bare. Alanna pointed to the bodies of the hillmen she and Coram had slain. They did not think I was a worthy opponent either. Can you say that my friend and I would be dead at the hillmen's swords if you had not come? They took my sword from me. She swallowed hard and said recklessly, What is a sword? I have my axe and my dagger and my spear. I have Coram Smithison to watch my back as I watch his. Big words from a small woman, Halif Sif remarked. There was no way for Alanna to read his expression. One of the riders, a Bazir head and shoulders taller than most of his companions, brought his horse forward, peering at Alanna's face intently. Suddenly, he nodded with satisfaction. She is the one, he exclaimed. Halif, she is the burning brightly one. Speak on, Gamel, Halif ordered. The huge warrior was bowing as low to Alanna as his saddle would permit. Would you remember me? He asked hopefully. I was at the smallest west gate, in the stone village that northerners call Persepolis. It was 6 rainy seasons ago. Your master, the blue-eyed one, bought my silence with a gold coin. Remembering, Alanna grinned. Of course! And you spat on the coin and bit it. The big man looked at his chief. She is the one. She came with the blue-eyed prince, the night one, and they freed us from the Black City. He made the sign against evil close to his chest. I let them through the gate that morning. Halif frowned as he watched Alanna. Is this so? Alanna shrugged. Prince Jonathan and I went to the Black City, yes, she admitted, and we fought the Yazdir. The nameless ones, she said hurriedly as the men muttered uneasily. And we beat them. It wasn't easy. A skinny man, wearing the green robes of a Bazir shaman, or petty wizard, threw back his hood, his scraggly beard thrust forward on a sallow chin. "She lies!" he cried, putting his horse between Alanna and the tribesmen. "The burning brightly one and the night one rode into the sky in a chariot of fire when the nameless ones perished. This all men know." "They rode back to the stone village on horses," Gamal replied stubbornly, "and the mare ridden by the burning brightly one was even as this one now, the color of sand, with a mane and tail like the clouds." While the vizier argued among themselves, Coram drew near his mistress. "Now you've gone and done it?" he asked softly. "I think it's more of a question of what John and I did," Alanna whispered back. "I told you about going to the Black City, didn't I? We fought demons there, and John found out I was really a girl. It was 6 years ago." "If I'd known I'd be riding with a legend, I'd have thought twice about coming along," Coram grumbled. "Silence!" Halif ordered them all. He looked at Alanna. "For the moment, let us accept that you are a warrior of the Northern King, woman who rides like a man. Your shield is proof of that. As headman of the Bloody Hawk, I invite you to share our fire this night." Alanna eyed the tall vizier, wondering, "Do I have a choice?" Finally, she bowed. "We are honored by your invitation. Certainly, we could not think of refusing." The tent she and Coram were given to share was large and airy, well stocked with comfortable pillows and rugs. Alanna flopped down, thinking of what she had seen of the village itself. A rough count of the tents indicated the Bloody Hawk encompassed at least 20 families. Some of the bachelors would live apart from their parents in a single large tent. The shaman, the man wearing the burnous tied with a green cord, had vanished into the largest tent in the village. From what her teacher Sir Miles had taught her, his dwelling would double as the tribe's temple. Her reverie was interrupted by 3 young members of the tribe. 2 wore the face veil all Bazir women put on when they begin their women's cycles of monthly bleeding. The taller girl balanced a tray of food and wine. Carefully, she placed it on the ground between Coram and Alanna, as the other girl and a tall, handsome boy stared at the guests. "We have never seen a woman with light eyes," the boy said abruptly. "Did the water that falls from the sky in the north wash all the color away?" "Of course it didn't, Ishak," the smaller girl retorted. "How would her eyes be purple then?" "Ishak, Karim, hush," the girl who had carried the tray snapped. She bowed very low to Alanna and Coram. "Forgive my friends. They forget that they have been made adults of the tribe." She glared at her friends. "I let you come with me because you promised not to say anything. You broke your word." "I didn't swear it by my ancestors," the boy called Ishak said virtuously. "Well, your cat. Let me pet him." Coram, the smaller girl, asked Alanna. "His eyes are purple too. He's very handsome. Is he your brother, who was turned into a cat by great sorcery?" Faithful, looking smug over the praise, sauntered over to the visitors, letting them pet and admire him. Alanna smiled at their guess that she and Faithful related somehow. Many others had wondered about that fact, the fact that she and the cat had the same eye color. "No," she replied, pouring wine for Coram and herself. "Faithful is just a cat. My brother is a sorcerer, but he is still shaped as a human. Or he was when I saw him last." "I am Kara," the tall girl announced. "I am to serve you until your fate is decided by the tribe. And now, we should go," she admitted reluctantly. "We weren't supposed to stay long. Akan ibn Nazir says you will corrupt us if we are not careful." Alanna and Coram exchanged worried glances. "Who is this?" Coram made a face at his inability to remember the harsh Bazir name. The one who says we'll corrupt ye." "Aknan ibn Nazir," Ishak said from the doorway. "The shaman. He says you are demons who have come to try our faith." Coram crossed her eyes. Ibn Azir is an old stick with a beard like weeds. Shocked, Kara ushered Coram and Ishak from the tent. Coram shook his head worriedly. I don't like the smell of this, he admitted. Do you think there's anything we can do? Alanna was rolling herself up in an embroidered throw. I plan to take a nap. She yawned. Until the tribe decides what to do with us, we can't do a thing. Within moments, she was fast asleep, Faithful curled up beside her nose. Coram was working on his third cup of date wine when Halif Sif looked into the tent. She looks softer when she sleeps, he commented quietly. When she awakes, tell her the tribe will decide your fate before the evening meal at the campfire. I will send for you. Coram nodded and finished his wine. Alanna was right. There was little they could do now. Making himself comfortable, he took a nap of his own. The last streaks of sunlight were fading in the west when Alanna awoke from her nap. Coram was still asleep, snoring lightly, and Faithful had vanished. Yawning and stretching, she stepped outside to find the village oddly still, as if it had been deserted. She would have gone to explore when Ishak, who was crouched beside the doorway of her tent, caught at her pant leg. Covering his lips with a warning finger, he led her back into the tent. It is the moment of the voice, he explained when they were inside. Coram was smoothing his sleep-ruffled hair. All adults in the tribe must be present, but I was told to attend you. He looked up as voices sounded outside. It is over, and soon they will call you, and I will take you to them. Aren't you afraid we'll corrupt you? Coram asked kindly. The boy shook his head. Halif Sif says only the man who wishes to be corrupted will fall into evil ways. Halif Sif is wise in the ways of men. Wiser than your shaman? Alanna asked. Adnan ibn Nazir is an old desert hen, the boy said scornfully. His magic hurts more than it helps. He looked eagerly at Alanna. Ibn Nazir says you are a sorceress from the north. Will you teach me your sorcery? Look, I already know a little. Reaching out, he concentrated on the ball of reddish fire growing at his fingertips. Alanna knocked his hand away, breaking Ishak's concentration. I know nothing of magic, she said harshly, and I want to know nothing of magic. The gift only leads to pain and death. Kara appeared in the doorway and bowed. Ishak, help our guests to get ready, she commanded. She swallowed hard, looking at Alanna. Will you need help, woman who rides like a man? Alanna smiled. Thank you, Kara. I can manage for myself. The girl bowed again. Ishak will bring you to the central fire when you are ready, she said before letting the tent flap fall. Coram was already breaking open one of Alanna's saddlebags, bringing out her mail shirt and leggings. Ishak gasped in admiration, touching the gold-washed armor with reverent fingers. Alanna had been given the mail by her friends on her 18th birthday. Although she had plain steel mail to wear, this was specially made for her and particularly light. She fastened the amethyst trim belt at her waist, removing the sheaths for sword and dagger. It would not be polite to go armed, and it still hurt to look at lightning. She hooked gauntlets decorated with her lioness rampant design into her belt and nodded to Coram. I'll wait for you two outside, she said casually. I need to think. She was actually responding to Faithful's soft hiss just outside the tent. She went to stand beside her pet, scanning the rapidly falling darkness. What do you want? She whispered. We have these people to... Shadows moved against the night, and she froze. Aknan ibn Nazir was leading a horse into the darkness. "Now what do you suppose he's up to?" Alanna asked Faithful. "Do you think he means trouble for us?" "Yes," the cat replied. "He was asking the young ones who came into your tent what you had of value. I don't think he asked because he means well." Alanna sighed and followed Ishak and Coram to the campfire. Wasn't life difficult enough earning the enmity of a Bazir shaman? Without earning the enmity of a Bazir shaman? She was given the place on Halif Sif's right, with Coram beside her and Faith settling down in front of her crossed legs. As the men of the tribe settled into the great circle formed by the firelight, Alanna took a closer look at Halif Sif. With his burnous off his head, the headman looked to be in his late 30s. He was hook-nosed and lean. Sharp lines were drawn from his nostrils to the corners of his thin mouth. A man who's seen a lot of life, Alanna decided. The women of the tribe watched from behind the men, their eyes glittering over their face veils. Alanna tried to keep her nervousness hidden. She wanted to make friends with these people, and she had no way of knowing if they wanted to make a friend of her. A flicker of green caught her attention, and she turned, with the others, to watch the shaman take his place opposite of Halif Sif. He looked pleased with himself. Something told Alanna he had been up to mischief. Halif raised his voice so that everyone could hear. "There are two voices in our tribe. One speaks for the acceptance of the intruder, saying they are a sacred one and the servant of a sacred one, deserving honor at our hands. One calls for their deaths, saying they are the servants of the king in the north, and that women must not act as men. By our custom, the strangers must hear each voice and answer. So it has always been. Before others speak, I will say what I must say. I am headman of the Bloody Hawk. This is my right. I do not know that this woman is the burning brightly one who came with the night one to free us from the Black City. She claims to serve the king in the north, and he is our enemy. Yet she came here in peace until the hillmen attacked her. Then she fought well. She and her servant killed many of the hillmen who are our foes. She rides as a man, goes unveiled as a man, fights as a man. Let her prove herself worthy as a man, worthy of her weapons and of our friendship." Finished, he bowed his dark head. The arguing began, with the shaman speaking next. Alanna wasn't surprised to hear him accuse her of blasphemy against the gods for her manner of dress and her way of life. Some of the priests at the royal palace had said much the same, when her true identity had been revealed. Gamal followed the shaman, once again telling the story of the strange events at the Black City 6 years before. One tall Bazir named Hakim Farrar spoke of the penalty owed to any outsiders, death. And the others in the tribe asked for moderation, saying that people who did not change with the new times were doomed to extinction. The debate went on while Faithful took a nap. If her life and Coram's had not been at stake, Alanna would have been bored by the long speeches. As it was, she felt a growing respect for Halif Sif's insistence on hearing each man's opinion. It was not the first time she noticed the great concern the Bazir people had for the right of all to speak out. In some matters, even the women had a say, she discovered later. But it would not be the last. Only once did they say something to puzzle her. The voice gave her and the blue-eyed prince honor when they returned from battle with the nameless ones, Gamal told the shaman hotly. The voice also says we must decide her fate ourselves, Gamal, Halif warned. Be still. Justice will be done. Alanna frowned. Ishak had mentioned a moment of the voice. Now, Gamal and the headman spoke of the voice. Did Miles ever tell me of a Bazir god or priest by that name? She wondered. I don't think so. I'll ask Khalif Sif about this. About his voice. If I survive the night. The oldest man of the tribe raised his hand. There is a way to decide this woman's status. She bears weapons as a man. Let her fight as a man. Give her the trial by combat. If she wins, the tribe is wise to accept her. If she loses, let her servant be killed also. The shaman jumped up screaming, "The favor of the gods to the man who kills her! I swear it!" If the favor of the gods is offered, Alanna asked mildly, why don't you kill me yourself? There was a murmur of laughter, and the shaman whirled to glare at Alanna. She mocks our ways, he cried. I mock a shaman who looks at the goods I possess and calls for my death because he says I offend the gods. Can you tell me you have no interest in what I own? She asked steadily, her eyes never wavering from his staring ones. Khalif rubbed his chin thoughtfully. 1/3 of what you have goes to him who slays you. 1/3 goes to the headman, and 1/3 goes to the priest. It has always been so. Alanna smiled angrily. I thought as much. Khalif Sif raised his hands. The men of the tribe will vote on this matter, to grant the woman who rides like a man the trial by combat. Women passed among the men with bits of parchment, reeds for writing, and ink. They returned to collect the folded papers, and Khalif Sif counted them. He took great care to unfold each paper and place it in one of 2 piles before him, so that no one could accuse him of manipulating the vote. Once again, Alanna was impressed with Bazir honesty. At last the votes were counted. It is the combat, Khalif Sif announced. Chapter 2. The Bloody Hawk. Alanna stood, nervously rubbing her suddenly wet palms on her tunic. I accept the will of the tribe. Who will carry it out? Hakim Farrar stood. The law's the law. I will fight for the tribe. Alanna bent to strip away her boots and stockings, examining her would-be opponent. He was head and shoulders taller than she, and his naked torso showed hard muscles in the firelight. He seemed agile enough, but only the fight would confirm that. Coram tied her hair back with a leather thong, his calloused hands gentle. As she began her loosening up exercises, he knelt beside her. Be careful, he cautioned, his voice a whisper. They fight to the death here. Alanna scrubbed her palms with sand to dry them. I won't kill if I don't have to, she replied quietly, remembering her last duel. Coram shrugged. Be that as it may. If it's a question of ye dying or him, it had better be him. Alanna grinned mischievously at her longtime teacher and accepted her dagger from Ishak, who had brought it to her from her tent. I won't argue that. Sorry. She waited for the shaman to finish exhorting her opponent, fingering the ember stone. There was no way she could avoid remembering her duel 4 weeks ago, the one that had ended with Duke Roger on the floor of the great hall, dead. Unlike the sorcerer Duke, she did not hate this tribesman. She hoped it would not come to killing tonight. Khalif stood. Are you ready, man of the tribe? Hakim saluted the headman with his dagger. I am ready. Are you ready, woman of the northern king? Alanna saluted, her mouth paper dry. I am. The headman clapped his hand sharply, and the tribesman stepped back. Hakim circled, his eyes sharp. Meet your death, woman, he cried. Alanna crouched, watching his circling form and remaining silent. She had never followed the practice of shouting insults at an enemy. This was no time to start. Remembering the advice of her friend George, the king of thieves, she kept her eyes on Hakim's blade. He thrust, she skipped aside, then danced in close, slashing for his chest. He leapt back and began to circle once more, his eyes wary. Her lightning response had taught him to treat her with caution. He feigned high, then dove in, his knife coming from beneath. Alanna turned her side towards him as his arm shot past her. She seized it and wrenched him over her hip. Coram let out a whoop of joy. Wrestling had always been her weak point, and silenced himself as the Vizier glared at him. Hakim rolled to his feet as she kept back, unwilling to follow up her advantage. He wiped his hands on his breeches, his eyes never leaving her. He was sweating, and Alanna could feel the fear rolling off him. Teach him to think woman's an easy opponent, she thought as she lunged in. He caught her crossguard on his, bearing up on the locked knives. Alanna dropped and rolled away before coming to her feet. Hakim lunged wildly, the blade slicing towards her unprotected shoulder. Twisting, Alanna stabbed through the web of muscle at the bottom of his upper arm. She yanked her knife free, just as one of his fists struck the middle of her spine, driving the wind from her lungs. Again, she dropped and rolled. He threw himself toward her. This time, she helped him over her head with her foot, sending him flying across the cleared space. Breathing hard, she rolled to her feet. Hakim rose, dashing sweat from his eyes. He closed too slowly, giving her time to maneuver into position. Grabbing his knife arm, she rapped him hard on the temple with her dagger hilt. Hakim went down like a stone, and stayed down. "You may kill him," Halif told her. "It is your right." Alanna wiped her sweaty face. "I won't kill when I don't have to. I hate waste." Men assisted Hakim from the circle as Coram gave her a towel. Faithful twined around her ankles. "You did well," the ex-soldier whispered. "Any of us who taught you would have been proud of that fight." The Vizier crowded around to offer their congratulations. Only a few stayed back, including the shaman, Alanna ibn Nazir. Thinking to make amends, Alanna went to him, her hand outstretched. "Is there peace between us?" she asked. "I mean no offense to you or your ways." "Unnatural woman," he snarled. "The balance will never be right as long as you act like a man." He glared at the now silent Vizier. "Our tribe will suffer until the she-demon is cast out." Gathering his burnous around himself, he stalked off. For a moment, all were silent. Finally, Alanna shrugged and turned to Halif Sif. "Now what?" she asked. The headman's set face boded ill for the shaman. Then, he too shrugged. "The law's the law. You survived the combat. You are one of us." The tribesmen murmured their agreement. Alanna ibn Nazir is no longer young. New ideas come less easily to him. He smiled at her. "Now, we make you a warrior of the tribe, and your man Coram, if you will speak for him." "Of course I'll speak for him. How can he ask?" "Then hold out your arm." Halif instructed. Alanna obeyed. In a swift movement, the man opened a low, shallow cut on the inside of her forearm. Holding out his own wrist, he did the same to himself, then pressed his wound to Alanna's. "Become one with the tribe, and one with our people," he commanded, his soft voice suddenly deep and ringing. Alanna shuddered as an alien magic flooded into her body. She knew without being told that Halif Sif was only a pathway for this sorcery, that its origins were as old as the Vizier tribes. Their combined blood welled up, dripping onto the sand. The watching men set up a cheer. Touching the ember stone, she watched as Gamal performed the ritual with Coram. The magic was glittering white. It filled the air around them all, flooding from every Vizier present. She let Ishak bind up her arm, feeling a moment's sympathy for Coram. The ex-soldier was obviously unhappy that he had taken part in an exercise of sorcery, albeit a short one. Now they were truly members of the Bazir, tied by blood and magic to the desert men. The drinking started. Women brought out food as the men told stories, recounting their greatest legends for the two new members of the tribe. The sky was gray in the east when Alanna gave up and went to bed. Coram had been moved into bachelor's quarters. Evidently, her new status did not excuse her from the proprieties. Amused, she fell into her pillows and sank immediately into sleep. Sunlight in her eyes roused her. Her tent flap was open. From the sun's position, she saw it was noon. Moaning and clutching her aching head, Alanna lurched to her feet. "We've been waiting forever," Coram announced. Alanna scowled at the two Bazir girls who had welcomed her the previous day. "I didn't go to bed till dawn," she growled. She ducked behind a partition and changed her clothes, feeling very old and much the worse for a night of date wine. "They made you a warrior of the tribe." Kara's voice was filled with awe. "And you're a woman." Alanna pulled on the fresh tan burnous she found with her clothes. If she was a Bazir, she might as well dress like one. Emerging from behind the partition, she bathed her face in a basin of water. "Adnan ibn Azir says you're a demon," Coram told her. "He says you have destroyed the eternal balance. He wants us all to kill you." Alanna dried her face briskly and pulled a comb through her hair before answering. "Nonsense. If your eternal balance is destroyed, why did the sun rise? If I'm a demon, why do I have such a headache?" Using fresh water, she cleaned her teeth. "Are all the women in the North warriors?" Coram asked. Kara was setting out breakfast, fruit and chilled fruit juice, rolls and cheese. "Are you all sorcerers and she-demons?" Alanna rubbed her aching head. Was she supposed to eat all that? Hardly, she replied to Coram. She sat awkwardly before the low table, crossing her legs before her. Inspired, she told the girls, "Why don't you join me? I'd welcome the company." It wasn't quite the truth, but chances were the girls would be far hungrier than she was at the moment. Coram needed no urging, but Kara hesitated. "It wouldn't be proper," she demurred, her eyes uncertain over her face veil. "Of course it's proper," Alanna said firmly. "I'm female, aren't I? At least, I was the last time I checked." Even Kara smiled at that. She and Coram slipped off their veils. Kara was older, fine-boned, and dark-eyed, with two deep-set dimples framing her mouth. Lovely. Coram had mischievous gray-brown eyes and a pointed little chin. Both were too thin, even for rapidly growing teenagers, and their clothes were of poor quality. If Alanna had remembered Sir Miles's teaching correctly, both were old enough to be married. The desert people contracted alliances for their daughters when they first donned veils, at the age of 12. Why were these two single? Alanna picked up a roll, and the girls eagerly helped themselves. "If the northern women aren't warriors," Coram went on, her mouth full, "how do you become a knight?" Alanna smiled reluctantly. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. Seeing that her audience was listening intently, she sighed. "I was 10. My mother died giving my twin brother and me birth, and our father was a scholar who cared more for his work than us. Coram raised us, and old Maud, who was our village healing woman. You see, Tom had no turn for woodcraft and archery, and I did. He was good at magical things. When our father decided it was time for me to go to the convent and learn to be a lady, I didn't want to, and Tom didn't want to go to the palace and become a knight." "You changed places?" whispered Coram. Kara's eyes were like saucers. Alanna nodded. Tom forged letters from our father. He went to the city of the gods, and I went to the palace as his twin brother, Alan. Did your brother disguise himself as a girl? Kara wanted to know. Alanna laughed. Of course not. The daughters at the convent took boys who would be priests and sorcerers until they're 12 or so. Then Tom went to the Mithrin priests to complete his studies. He left them only a few months ago. He's the youngest master living. He must have great power, Kara breathed. He certainly does, Alanna replied slowly, and the ambition to go with it, she added to herself. You lived as a boy all those years? Coram demanded, and no one guessed. No one knew? One of my teachers, Sir Miles of Alou, he guessed. I had to use magic to save Prince Jonathan when he had the sweating sickness and Miles was watching. He must have seen something that gave me away. He knew for years, but he never told anyone. I told George Cooper when I needed a healing woman once. Who's this George Cooper? Asked Coram. Alanna grinned. The king of thieves. You told a thief your secret? Kara gasped. I knew I could trust him. He's always done well by me. Did anyone else know? Coram's mouth was full again. Prince Jonathan found out when we fought the Yensdir. Both girls made the sign against evil. Like Albazir, they had grown up fearing the Yensdir. They made my clothes disappear, Alanna continued, blushing. By the time I was old enough, there was no way John could have misunderstood. Your chest, Kara nodded, startled. She added, that's right. How did you manage to disguise that? I bound myself, Alanna confessed. I never took my shirt off around the boys either. It was difficult at first, but after a while they just accepted the fact that I was eccentric. I still don't understand. Kara was frowning. Women are weaker than men and unfit to be warriors. Surely they could tell. Not for me, Alanna said firmly, finishing off her juice. I worked hard to win my shield. I got up early. I practiced late at night. It was hard, very hard, but it was worth it. I was good enough that Jonathan made me his squire. Did he change his mind when he found out about the truth? Coram asked as she tidied up. Alanna's blush returned. No. He said he didn't care. I was still one of the best fighters at court. None of our men would have said that, Coram muttered, even if it was true. You can't know that, Alanna told the younger girl. I didn't find out until recently that Miles had known all these years. Men are peculiar. Looking at Kara, she said, Why are you so unhappy? You never had a young man? Kara explained mournfully. You know, bring you tokens to take you walking? Neither have we, Coram reminded her. We're practically outcasts from the tribe, Kara responded. Surely Alanna's case is different. Unless Prince Jonathan, Coram muttered. Both girls saw the misty smile on Alanna's face and giggled. It's time for me to have a look around the village, Alanna told them as she rose. She couldn't explain that her relationship with John had progressed far beyond the tokens and walks stage. Neither could she tell these two innocents that George, the king of thieves, had indicated more than once he would like to take Jonathan's place in her affections. They would just be confused, Alanna told herself as the girls donned face veils once more. Although, they certainly can't be any more confused than I am. The dust-colored tent village was quiet, except for the laughter of children and the cackle of chickens. Few men were visible. Either riding or sleeping off last night, Alanna thought grumpily. Most of the women abroad hurried out of her path. Puzzled, she stopped to see if anyone would meet her eyes. Only the youngest children did, and they were snatched from her sight by their mothers. They really do think I'm some kind of demon, she whispered, shocked. They're just ignorant, Coram replied stubbornly. We know, Kara and Ishak and I, that you're an ordinary woman. Not an ordinary woman, Kara demurred. But you're real. Alanna halted. What makes you three so ready to believe I'm really human? She asked. The girls exchanged looks. Aknan ibn Zir says the three of us are easily distracted from the right path, and that we are the growing ground for evil, Kara explained. Her face had darkened. Perhaps I am a growing ground for evil, she cried, but I am not a mean old man who cannot countenance anything new. I don't make people outcasts because they don't bow down to me. Coram nodded solemnly. It's true, she assured Alanna. Halif Sif will not let him cast us out into the desert, but if Aknan ibn Zir was still here when Halif Sif dies... Demon! The shriek of rage came from behind them. Alanna spun, her hand instantly going to Lightning's hilt. For a moment, her heart twisted with pain as she remembered that her sword was useless. Ibn Zir, the shaman, stood before them, flanked by women and a few men. Demon! He screamed again, pointing a trembling finger at Alanna. Not content with the soul of Halif Sif, you try to steal our young ones! He grabbed Kara's arm and yanked, almost making her fall. Halif Sif came out of a nearby tent, going to stand beside Alanna and Coram. He raised polite brows. I believe I retain my soul, Aknan ibn Zir, he said quietly. Surely I would know if it was gone. Alanna stared wide-eyed at the sword, which Ibn Zir had not been wearing the day before. It was the crystal sword that had so neatly sheared Lightning's blade. The sword, she thought, was left in the desert. So that's what he was doing, sneaking off last night, she thought. The sword's hilt design was distinctive. Where had she seen it before? She has bewitched you, the shaman cried, his eyes bulging with fury. As she has bewitched these others. The wave of his hand took in the girls. He gasped as Faithful suddenly leapt out, seemingly from nowhere, to land spitting in the sand before the shaman. Away, demon! He cried. Frantically he drew shimmering yellow magical symbols in the air. Alanna reacted. Stop! A wall of purple magic streaked from her fingers to surround Faithful, just as yellow fire left the shaman's hand. It shattered against the wall, protecting Faithful. Ibn Zir swore. For a moment there was silence as the violet wall faded from sight. Perhaps now you will give more courtesy to the companions of the woman who rides like a man, Aknan ibn Zir, Halif Sif commented, his voice a quiet warning. Tell me now where you obtained the sword you wear. It lay in the desert for anyone to take who could, the older man spat. I knew the spells to assuage its hunger and to give it greater life. Let me see it, Halif Sif ordered, stretching out his hand. When the shaman hesitated, the younger man's face grew stern. I am the headman here, and headman I stay until the voice of the tribe takes my right from me. The request is reasonable. Do not defy me. Trembling with fury, the shaman unclipped the sword's sheath and held it out. The headman reached for it. Stop him, Faithful warned. Don't touch it, Alanna cried. Everyone looked at her. Ibn Zir glared pure hate. Fingering Lightning's hilt, Alanna continued. Such swords bite, Halif. I imagine Adnan ibn Nazir knows it too. She gripped the silver hilt of the crystal blade and drew it. The sword's magic screeched through her. Alanna bit back a yell of pain. Sweat poured down her face as she struggled with pure magic, forcing it slowly to her will. At last the sword's resistance lessened. She looked up at Halif. It might have killed you, unless you have the gift. The man shook his head. It's magic, but the magic's... It's magic, but the magic's been used for killing and breaking. It can only be controlled by someone with the gift. You don't have to be a sorcerer, just stubborn. Halif rounded on Ibn Nazir. You knew this? His soft voice was dangerous. I swear I did not, the shaman cried. I know of the power, as would any man who grasped it with his hand. Or any woman, murmured Ishak, who had followed Halif. Ibn Nazir glared at him swiftly before returning to Halif. That it would harm, even kill the headman. He drew himself up as far as he could. Such an offense is one no shaman would commit, Halif. Has this woman corrupted you that you see evil everywhere you turn? Alanna studied the crystal sword. Its hilt was slightly longer than Lightning's, etched with occult symbols and studded at the pommel with sapphires and diamonds. She had seen symbols like these recently. Remembering, she dropped the blade, backing away from it in horror. The shaman stooped and grabbed it, slamming it into its sheath. What's wrong with you? Coram demanded softly. She had not seen him arrive. Roger, she whispered. The hilt. It's the same as Duke Roger's wizard's rod. I'll never be free of him. She turned and fled to her tent, Faithful galloping after her. Who is this Roger? Halif asked Coram as the crowd dispersed. Alanna's friend waited until they were alone before he replied. He kept his powerful voice, low. Duke Roger of Conte. Him that was next in line to Prince Jonathan for the throne of Tortle. Halif made the sign against evil. The great sorcerer who was killed not one moon past? Coram nodded. Aye, she slew him. For his plot to kill the queen. He sighed. She always hated the Duke. Feared him, even. He felt the same about her. She killed him in proper combat, before the king and his court, but she never felt right about it. His dark eyes were thoughtful. I'd give a lot to know how a sword that looks like his wizard's rod turned up in her path now. Halif put his hand on Coram's shoulder. She has been chosen by the gods. Is that not reason enough? Alanna remained alone in her tent until dark, petting Faithful and remembering. No matter how she looked at it, she could see no way she could have done things differently. Made wary and aware by her ordeal of knighthood, she had searched Duke Roger's quarters. She had found enough evidence to damn him in any eyes. The wax model of the queen, worn away by falling water until the queen herself was close to death. Wax images of the king, the prince, and the important court officials. Even one of Alanna, all tied up in a thick veil. She had taken the evidence to King Roald, presented it before the entire court. Roger had demanded a trial by combat. She had won. She had hated Duke Roger of Conte, but she couldn't forget the sight of him as he was carried into his tomb far beneath the palace. She'd spent so much of her life thinking about the sorcerer who was Jonathan's cousin that it was hard to realize he was gone. You're being ridiculous, Faithful commented. He would have cut you up and fed you to wild beasts if he had won. He was evil. He deserved to die. I wish I could just view it that simply, Alanna said ruefully. Still wonder if perhaps I moved too fast. That's what he wanted you to think, remember? Was the cat's reply. Alanna shook her head, still unconvinced. Merciful mother, is it dark already? Night comes swiftly here, Halif commented from the doorway. He crouched beside her, his face in shadow. Already we have communed with the voice of the tribes. He comes. Who is this voice of the tribes? Alanna wanted to know. He is the first among us, the headman replied. At sunset we gather at our fires and join with him, each man and woman among the Bazir. Thus, he knows our thoughts and our wishes. He knows what has passed during the day. He judges with complete knowledge of our hearts and our minds. Alanna shivered, letting the Bazir help her to her feet. I doubt that I would be fit for such a life, she said dryly, to carry all those memories every day. No, indeed. Halif Sif chuckled as he led her out of the tent. Not many are called to the life of the voice, if that soothes you, he commented. He will be here within the week. For a moment the tall Bazir sighed, looking older than his years. Between thee and me, woman of the tribe, he said quietly, I hope the voice will aid me to a fair solution in this matter of Ibn Nazir. The old man disturbs the tribe's balance between headman and shaman. It cannot end well. She grimaced. Come, there are tales you have not heard. Before I forget his message, the voice asks me to say that you have met him in the sunset room of the Persepolis castle. The sunset room? She thought, startled. The governor of Persepolis castle! What was his name? Alim Mukhtab. He took us there. Me and John and Roll. Alex and Gary. He was the one who told us about the Black City. He was tall with a nice vest and intense eyes. John asked him for a written history of the Bazir. Ali Mukhtab, she whispered in shock. Ali Mukhtab is the voice of the tribes? He is, Halif Sif confirmed. What better man to keep watch over the castle where our oldest records are kept? Come, for now, become a member of the tribe. The voice will be here in 7 days. He will answer your questions then. Halif Sif was a man of his word. Alanna and Coram were returning from a hunt with the young men of the tribe a week later, when Faithful trotted out from the village to meet them. He's here, he yelled at Alanna in their private language, the voice of the tribes. He has very good taste. He likes cats. I know he likes cats, and I don't think that's an indication of good taste, Alanna replied, leading Moonlight to her hitching place with the tribe's other horses. Who's with him now? The shaman, Faithful replied. One of his women friends lured Halif Sif away with a lie about a quarrel in her household. The news isn't good? Coram asked quietly as they rubbed their horses down. Alanna shook her head. Ibn Nazir stolen a march on us with Ali Mukhtab. Coram raised his thick brows. The voice of the tribes. But weren't you saying you're friends once? Alanna shrugged, leading the way to her tent. That was 6 years ago. He may have changed. I don't know if he was this voice of the tribes then. She opened her tent flap and stopped, astounded, at the 5 bundles piled neatly inside. What in the name of... It is the first written history of the Bazir. The smooth voice behind them made Alanna and Coram jump. They turned to face Ali Mukhtab. The voice of the tribes wore a flowing blue burnous tied with a darker blue cord. Religious colors among the Bazir, Alanna remembered. He was the same as she had seen him last. Tall, with walnut-colored skin, and a neatly trimmed mustache. His large hooded eyes framed with curly lashes. He bowed now, his well-curved mouth turning up in a very small smile. Remembering her manners, Alanna invited him in. She was just wondering how she would offer hospitality to her distinguished guest when Kara and Ishak arrived, bearing chilled wine and fruit. They presented their offerings first to Muktab, then to Alanna and Coram, before taking up stations just outside the tent flap. Muktab chuckled. "I see you have been adopted," he commented. "Those are 2 of the 3 young ones you've bewitched?" "Oh, she hasn't bewitched anyone," Coram growled, emptying his cup in one gulp. "Ibn Nazir's a dried-up, jealous old man." "This is Coram Smithison," Alanna explained to the Vizier. "He taught me the basics of the knight's art, and he looked after me when I was a page." For a moment, Coram received the full power of Muktab's eyes, as the Vizier opened them wide, examining him from top to toe. Oddly, the burly man turned red. "She's Trebond," he said, as if answering a question. "Smithsons have served Trebond for generations." "You have always been blessed in your friends," Ali Muktab said to Alanna. "I suppose by now you are aware of it." Alanna nodded, blushing herself. "And so you are a knight, and you have told all that you are female. But you are not happy." Alanna fiddled nervously with the ember stone at her neck. "I have a few things on my mind." She didn't object when the man reached over and picked the ember from her fingers, examining it. At last he sighed and let her tuck it beneath her shirt. "The favorite of the gods have always had much on their minds," he admitted. "The shaman says you're an unnatural leader because I will not order you slain. He thinks you have bewitched me. Is this so?" He was smiling. Suddenly, Alanna felt as if a burden had been taken from her. This enigmatic man was still her friend, for whatever reasons. Coram snorted with derision. "And when did she have time to do that?" Muktab nodded. "I asked the same question, but received no satisfactory answer. When I inquired how the voice of the tribes may order the slaying of a member of the tribe without full cause under the law and a just hearing before the fire, Ibn Nazir told me that the nameless gods would have my soul for their enjoyment." The Vizier shrugged. "The law is the law, and he knows this as well as any." His eyes were serious as he looked at Alanna. "He wants you dead, Alanna of Trebond." "He had his chance when Hakim fought me," she replied carelessly. "I don't understand why he's making a fuss now." "You're a terrifying creature," the voice told her solemnly. "You do not take your place in your father's tent, letting men make your decisions. You ride as a man. You fight as a man. And you think as a man." "I think as a human being," she retorted hotly. "Men don't think any differently from women. They just make more noise about being able to." As Coram chuckled, Muktab said, "Have you not discovered that when people, men and women, find a woman who acts intelligently, they say she acts like a man?" Alanna could find no answer to this. She glared at the guffawing Coram. "Many of those who take the shaman's leadership are women," Muktab went on. "You frighten them. You are too new. You are too different. Will they have to behave differently now that you are of the tribe? Better that you die and become a legend. Legends force no one to change." "This is too silly for words," Alanna snapped. "Why have you brought this history to me?" She waved at the bundled scrolls. 6 years ago, Prince Jonathan indicated he would be interested in a written history of the Vizier, Muktab explained. "Since your return to the north, my people and I have labored long on such a written record. Our tribes are very old. These scrolls tell all our history from the time before we left our farms across the inland sea. We ask you to see that the prince gets them as soon as possible. It is vital." He looked at Coram. "May I speak with her alone?" Coram struggled to his feet and left. Alanna watched him go before asking, "Why is it vital? I hadn't planned on returning to the palace for a long time, if ever," she thought with a terrible feeling of homesickness. "It is vital," Ali Mukhtab whispered, leaning close, "because the end of my life draws near. Before I complete my last illness, Prince Jonathan must become the voice of the tribes." Woo! That's a hot button topic, huh? To end that chapter on? An hour and 15 minutes, y'all. Hour and 15 minutes. That's how long the 2 chapters are gone. My voice sounds off, and I think you can start to kind of hear the deterioration of my voice as the chapters go on. That's mostly because my job is to talk on the phone with people all day. So that's another reason I don't do like super long videos, because I'm old and my voice hates me. Anyway, what did we think of those chapters? That was interesting. That shaman needs some like anxiety medication or something. That dude's head is not screwed on all the way. I think the children are sweet. I think that Kara is thoughtful. Coram is young. And Ishak is an issue, I think. He seems a little bit eager, but, you know, it is what it is. I think those chapters were nice. I think the ending of chapter 2, the realization that Jonathan has to now become the voice of the tribes. What? I say that like I've never read these books before, but I kind of always act like I've never read these books before. Keep in mind, I've read these books like 10 times since I was 12. So I know them pretty well. I think it was a good jumping off point. You really got to see her really integrate herself into the tribe. Really, honestly, she really embraced them quite easily. Her and although Coram grumbled about it a little bit, but, you know, she really embraced the tribe, or she's trying to, now that they've taken her in. And it's always good to learn new cultures. So that's nice. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. It's been a long night. But I won't use an accent for the Vizier because it feels icky to me. Being American feels very, I don't know, it just feels gross. I can do European accents all day. All day. I will do European accents. But that's, you know, that's how it is. Anyway, I think this is going to be a fun book. I think there's going to be a lot that's going to happen. It's a little bit longer of a book, I think. Well, it's not longer. There's, let's see how many chapters. I mean, there's 10 chapters, so it's not really any longer than the second book, I don't think. Anyway, this was fun. Not as cheerful as an outro. It's late and I'm tired, and I still have to upload this video. So, I am going to leave it at that. Please leave your comments down below. Like and subscribe. If you are new here, please go to the playlist and listen to the other books. Starting with the very first one there. It's a great time. Anyway, I'm going to leave you guys with that. I hope you guys are drinking your water. I hope you're taking care of yourself. And I hope you have a fantastic night. Please sleep well. Be well. You guys have a good one. Okay, thanks. Love you. Bye.